On one of the hottest days of year 68, a man in a tattered tunic was running through the dusty streets of Rome. His name was Lucius Marcius Felix, and he was a centurion of the Praetorian Guard. Behind him, 3 mercenaries in grey cloaks pursued him relentlessly. He knew that if they caught him, he would not live to see the next sunrise. It all began 3 days ago when Lucius accidentally overheard a conversation between 2 senators in the shadow of a colonnade at the Forum. They were whispering about betrayal, about a conspiracy against Nero. The emperor was not the most beloved ruler, but Lucius had sworn allegiance to him. He understood, if these men succeeded, the city would drown in blood. He made a decision, to warn the emperor, but someone found out. Assassins broke into his home, and only his warriors' reflexes saved him. Now he was on the streets, without armor, without weapons, with a single goal, to survive and fulfill his duty. Lucius darted into a narrow alley, hoping to disappear among merchants and beggars. He quickly turned into a dark courtyard, pressed himself behind a column, and held his breath. The footsteps of his pursuers drew closer. One of them stopped at the entrance, another peered inside. But Lucius knew Rome better. He leaped over a low wall into the neighboring yard and sprinted toward the palace. By the time he reached the Palatine Hill, his blood was pounding in his temples. The guards exchanged glances but recognized him. He burst into Nero's chambers only to be met with an unexpected sight. The emperor, dressed in a purple tunic, was reclining with a cup of wine, strumming his lyre, and beside him, those same senators. Lucius stopped, gasping for breath. It all became clear. This was not a conspiracy against Nero. This was a conspiracy with Nero. "You know too much, Felix," the emperor smirked. Lucius slowly reached for the dagger at the nearest guard's belt. The city trembled under the weight of the heat. The air above the stone streets of Rome shimmered like smoke from the sacrificial fires in the temple of Vesta. Dirt, blood, and dust mixed with the smells of market stalls selling salted fish, wine, and spices. But amid all this chaos, amid the cries of slaves, the curses of merchants, and the clatter of chariot wheels, there was one sound that Lucius Marcius Felix would recognize even in his sleep: fast, heavy footsteps. They were after him, the pursuers. 3, maybe 4. It didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was not stopping. He turned the corner, cutting through a shaded portico where prostitutes and beggars huddled. They didn't even notice the running man. In this city, everyone was saving themselves in their own way. From above, from the balconies, foul-smelling liquid dripped down as homeowners emptied their pots, trying to combat the unbearable stench of Rome. Lucius nearly slipped on a rotting pomegranate peel, but steadied himself and kept running. His heart pounded heavily. Sweat burned his eyes. He could not remember the last time he had felt fear, but he remembered how it all started. 3 days ago, when he was leaving the Praetorian barracks, he overheard a strange conversation. It was an accident, or fate. He didn't know. But as he passed the colonnade of the Temple of Jupiter, he spotted 2 senators speaking quietly. The trained ears of a soldier caught words that sent a chill through his chest. Tonight, he must not wake up. Lucius slowed his pace. "Everything is ready. Are you sure he won't escape?" Of course. He signed his own death sentence. They were talking about Nero, the very man he was sworn to protect, because he had taken an oath. But Lucius did not know whom he could trust. He was not a politician, not an intriguer. He was just a soldier. He decided to wait. First, he needed to understand if it was true. A conspiracy against the emperor was no small matter. If he was wrong, he himself would be torn apart. But whether he was wrong or not didn't matter, because by the next morning he felt someone watching him, and that night they attacked. Lucius woke to the faintest sound. Wind. No. A rustling. Someone was in his room. He grabbed his dagger instantly, but it was too late. Strong hands pinned him to the bed. He managed to twist away, but in the darkness a blade flashed. The tip passed just a hair's breadth from his throat. He rolled, driving his elbow into the gut of one of the attackers. Another lunged at him, but Lucius had already grabbed his gladius from the corner. A strike, a flash of pain, a scream. Who were they? Senators? No. Hired killers. Lucius understood only one thing. He had to disappear, or he would not live to see the morning, and now he was running. The footsteps behind him did not falter. Ahead lay a crowded square, his best chance to disappear. Lucius veered sharply, plunging into the throng, ducking beneath the canopy of a fabric vendor's stall. The merchant shouted something after him, but the Praetorian was already moving on. Around the corner, he pressed himself against a wall. The pursuers rushed past. Lucius closed his eyes and exhaled deeply. There was only one path left. To Nero. But what he would see there would change his life forever. Lucius knew he couldn't stay in one place. Rome had too many eyes, too many ears, and if they had already tried to kill him, the hunt was far from over. He slipped into a narrow alley where cloth awnings hung overhead, shielding the passage from the relentless sun. The stench was suffocating. Here, the remains of yesterday's meals, urine, and rancid oil mixed into an unbearable reek. But for now, this was the perfect hiding place. He stopped, pressing against a stone wall. His heart pounded in his chest, blood roared in his temples. In that moment, he understood. He had no choice. He had to reach the Palatine and tell Nero everything. There was no other way. But was it really a good idea? The emperor was an unpredictable man. He could be merciful, but he could just as easily kill over a single misplaced word, a single wrong gesture. Lucius remembered how, a year ago, one of his comrades, an excellent soldier, brave and loyal, had accidentally stepped on the edge of the emperor's cloak during a triumph. A week later, he disappeared. No one knew what had happened to him. No one asked. And yet, Lucius pushed himself off the wall and moved forward. He took the shortest route, through the market stalls and underground passages known only to soldiers. Before long, the Palatine Hill loomed ahead. There, in the Grand Palace, lived the man who could either save him or order his execution. Lucius slowed his pace as he approached the entrance. 2 Praetorian guards watched him with suspicion. He must have looked terrible. Dirty, disheveled, his face scratched, his tunic torn. "I am Centurion Lucius Marcius Felix. I must see the emperor immediately," he said, forcing his voice to remain steady. They exchanged glances but stepped aside. Perhaps they recognized him. Perhaps they saw that he was truly at his limit. The palace was cool, filled with the scent of incense and expensive oils. The floor was laid with intricate mosaics, the ceilings adorned with gold. Everywhere, slaves, courtiers, philosophers, musicians. It all felt so distant from his reality, from the chase, from the blood on his hands. A servant led him into the throne room, and the moment he crossed the threshold, he knew something was wrong. In the center of the hall, sprawled in a cushioned chair, sat Nero. Around him, musicians, young boys draped in silk, poets competing to praise his talents. The emperor was humming something, absent-mindedly plucking the strings of his lyre, not even looking at Lucius, and standing beside him, the senators, the very same ones he had overheard at the colonnade. They looked at him with slight smiles, as if they had been expecting him, as if they knew he would come. A cold knot formed in his stomach. Lucius took another step forward, but he already understood. He had been caught. Nero finally set his lyre aside and turned his gaze toward him. "Felix." His voice was lazy, almost amused. "You look disheveled." That tone, mocking, as if he had known everything from the start, as if this had never been a conspiracy against him, but a conspiracy with him. Lucius felt his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of the dagger at the nearest guard's belt. The guard didn't even have time to react. Lucius's hand moved like lightning, yanking the dagger from its sheath, and in the same instant, the blade was pressed beneath his chin. He froze, motionless. The hall fell silent. Someone choked on their wine. A fan stopped mid-air. But Nero merely raised an eyebrow as if this were nothing more than another performance for his amusement. "Oh, such passion," the emperor murmured, shaking his head. "Do you want to kill me, Felix?" Lucius didn't answer. He heard only his own breathing, the roar of blood in his ears. His entire body was tense, ready to strike. But he wasn't a fool. He knew that the moment he moved forward, he would die where he stood. The guards had already stepped toward him, but a subtle gesture from the Emperor held them back. Lucius saw the faint smirks on the senators' faces. They were enjoying this. They knew he was trapped. Nero rose slowly. He took a step closer. Now, only 2 steps separated them. "You were in such a hurry to see me, Felix." His voice was soft, almost affectionate. "And here you are. What did you want to tell me?" Lucius clenched his teeth. "I overheard a conversation," he exhaled, "about a conspiracy." "Ah, a conspiracy." Nero ran a finger along his chin, tilting his head in thought. "So many conspiracies, so many whispers. You have no idea, Felix, how many times in recent months I've had to listen to such rumors." He turned toward the senators. "He claims he heard you speaking. Were you discussing how to kill me?" The senators shook their heads, feigning offense. "Great Emperor, how could you even think such a thing? We were merely discussing the fate of your empire, how best to govern, the blessings of Rome." Lucius stiffened, his eyes darting to their faces. They were lying, of course they were lying. But it didn't matter. The Emperor had no interest in the truth. "Do you not trust me, Felix?" Nero suddenly asked, locking eyes with him. Lucius didn't answer. He understood now this wasn't a conspiracy against Nero, this was Nero's own conspiracy, and he, Lucius Marcius Felix, had walked into this hall like a lamb to the slaughter. The dagger in his hand trembled. He could attack. He could plunge the blade into this madman's throat, but he knew he wouldn't make it out alive. And what would it change? One tyrant would only be replaced by another. Rome lived by conspiracy. Rome lived by blood, and yet he couldn't simply surrender. "I swore an oath," he said quietly, staring straight into the Emperor's eyes. "An oath to protect you." Nero smirked. "Then protect me, Felix." His voice turned icy. "From yourself." Before Lucius could react, a shadow moved behind him. Pain. A flash of searing pain in his side. The blade slid beneath his ribs. He groaned and staggered. The dagger fell from his grip. The walls blurred before his eyes. Golden statues, the gleaming mosaic floor. Voices became distant, muffled. Nero sat back down, plucking the strings of his lyre as if nothing had happened. "What a tragic ending," he sighed. "Shame no one will ever hear it." The last thing Lucius saw before darkness swallowed him was the smirk of one of the senators. They had won, and he had been nothing but a pawn in their game. Darkness consumed his thoughts, but not all at once. He could still feel it, his body slowly sinking onto the cold mosaic floor, his hot blood spreading beneath him, seeping into the intricate patterns. Somewhere far away, the lyre's strings continued to hum under Nero's fingers. A soft melody, almost tender. A mockery. Lucius wanted to fight, wanted to rise, but his strength was slipping away. All this time, he had thought he was hunting traitors, thought his duty was to protect Rome, to protect the Emperor. But the truth was different. Nero himself was the shadow that no one could protect against. Rome never changed. Senators, praetorians, assassins, they had always been part of the same game where pawns were played as the powerful saw fit. The last thing he realized before his eyes closed forever, his death would change nothing. But history would remember. And so, my friends, ends the story of Lucius Marcius Felix. He was merely a part of a vast machine where the fate of one man meant almost nothing. But doesn't this remind you of something? Is the world really any different today? Power, intrigue, betrayal. Rome fell, but its spirit lives on. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments what historical events you'd like to explore next. We will continue diving into the darkest, most gripping moments of history. See you in the next stories. And remember, history is written by the victors,